Who is your neighbour?
I suppose it's really easy to say everyone. And that's true when we think about that commandment of loving your neighbour. We are called to love everyone, but it kind of seems really vague and disconnected from the way we live. So when I think about neighbour, I think probably about the idea of proximity. You know, when I look at Jesus' life, he was in close relationships with people in his community. He knew their names, their stories. He ate food with them. He understood who they were. And he saw them in a very specific way. He saw them not based on their circumstance, but based on their creative nature. I also think of that idea of proximity in terms of how we are global neighbours as well. We live in a time now where we're more connected than we've ever been, with the greatest possibility of relationships, and also the greatest consequence of how we live affecting those all around the world with what we consume and the energy that we use. And so I think there's a sense that the loving neighbour stuff is based around a closeness, that proximity of a knowing of. And when we look at Jesus, he did both. He did the local community, knowing the story, in relationship, the face-to-face stuff. And he also challenged the systems that would oppress, ostracise, marginalise people. And he talked about this as the kingdom of God. And I suppose that's the context that we live in as Christians now. We live in a sense that we're meant to adopt a sense of proximity in our local communities, but also understand our responsibility with our global proximity, our connection with our global neighbours and how we live. So I look at it that way, and I'm sure there's numerous ways of looking at it, but yeah.
Cool. How can we live in a way that shows love to both our local neighbours and also those global neighbours?
Yeah, I think this has been a bit of a journey of ours. You know, 4 years ago we kind of relocated into a neighbourhood to really explore what it means to know our neighbours, to know their stories, to kind of get past that us and them mentality, and even move beyond that we're doing mission to people kind of thing, to actually realise that the people in our community have value because they're made in the image of God, but also have stories that are worth hearing and have had experiences and live in particular ways because of their history. And then for us, it's a real privilege to kind of know those stories. So I think for us, at the very beginning of what that looks like, it's a knowing and a journeying with, and it's a setting a time aside, and it's an intentional kind of decision to live in a posture that has space to hear those stories, but also be a part of them now. And that can be somewhat inconvenient maybe to the plans and purposes I have for my own life, or the things that I want to do in a day, but also it's a real privilege. It's not a right, it's something that I get to do because of who God is and because of that understanding of how he sees people. I suppose when I think globally, that's probably the one I've been wrestling with more, is, you know, how do we advocate, how do we challenge, how do we influence the systems that are impacting people in South Asia, Southeast Asia, you know, in Africa, and in a world that's consistently impacted by global things. Like we look at climate change, we look at migration, we look at like the influence of a flawed economic system. But we also then are privileged enough to live in a country where we have a voice to challenge those systems. And I think for me, that's actually learning what that voice is and how to best use it. Yeah.
What are some practical everyday things that we could bring into our own lives that would allow us to better love our neighbours?
It's a really good question. Some of the things that we've done through our own journey, kind of asking this bigger question in terms of vocation and where we live have been about developing rhythms of time where we spend time with people in our neighbourhoods. So for us, that obviously meant relocating, but it also meant shopping at new places and spending time where communities were gathering, whether that be through schools or sports clubs or new places that we could meet people and new places where we could hear stories of people and get to know them. I think one of the really exciting parts of this journey for us is also realising that we can do some of the things that we love and are enjoyable, and we can also invite our neighbours to share that with us. We've done that through neighbourhood gardens and through some of the sports stuff that we do, and through community meals. And so I'm not sure if it's so much of a new strategy. It's probably more just making space to invite people into your life, and using those spaces to actually love and care and foster a relationship. Yeah.